This is Mom Steph, and welcome to my first math tutorial. So before we start, I just want to share the very reason why I made this math tutorial. It is because I want to help our students, specifically my students of grade 9 of Clarin National High School. Now, I was also encouraged by some of my friends, Sir Adonis, Mom Stella, Mom Janet, my husband, and some of my students. And another reason why nagkalakas ng loob ako to make this video is because of our situation right now, given that we are in the midst of quarantine because of COVID-19 and hindi pa sure kung kailan mag-open ng mga schools. So, this is my way of helping the Department of Education, parang contribution ko na rin, and helping students to cope na kahit nasa bahay lang sila, they can still learn, they can still study through math tutorial videos. I hope through my math tutorial videos. And I hope this math tutorial will help students, teachers, and parents in the future. So let's start. The topic that we're going to discuss in this video is for incoming grade 9 students, and that topic is quadratic equations. That is the first topic for grade 9 students for the first quarter. You should be able to achieve competency number 1, which is the learner should illustrate quadratic equations. Ibig sabihin, the students should know how to identify quadratic equations and the basics. So in your screen right now is the definition of a quadratic equation in one variable, taken from our grade 9 mathematics learners module. So an equation or a quadratic equation in one variable is a mathematical sentence of degree 2, which means the highest power in a quadratic equation is 2, not more than 2. If may nakita kayong highest power na more than 2, it is not anymore a quadratic equation. Now, quadratic equation can be written in the standard form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Hindi lahat ng quadratic equation ay of this form. Ito lang ay ating standard form. Now, if we have a quadratic equation in standard form, we can see 3 terms. So, we have the first term, which is called our quadratic term because it has, or the variable has the second degree power. The next term is called the linear term because the variable has the first degree power, while the third term or the last term is called the constant term kasi the third term has no variable with it, unlike our first term and second term. Now, don't forget to write equal to 0 or this part because without equal to 0 or equal to a number, it won't be an equation anymore. Now, A, B, and C sometimes are called coefficients. So, these coefficients are real numbers, which means pwede siyang maging irrational number, pwede siyang maging rational number. So, what are these numbers? It could be a fraction, it could be in decimal form, and pwedeng maging positive and negative number. Now, kasali rin sa real number ang 0. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga coefficients natin pwedeng maging 0, but except for letter A, for coefficient A. Why? Kasi, if naging 0 to, remember that this term is our quadratic term, which makes the equation a quadratic equation. So, if A becomes 0, 0 times x squared, the product is 0. So, this whole term becomes 0, which is mawawala ang ating quadratic term. Kaya, hindi na rin siya magiging quadratic equation. So, to understand more our definition, we will use some examples. So, for this example, determine if the following equations are quadratic equations. If it is, identify the quadratic, linear, and constant terms. So, we have number 1, x cubed minus 2x squared plus 3x equals 0. Now, obviously, hindi ito quadratic equation because, remember, a quadratic equation, the highest power is 2. So, Since meron siyang 3 na power, which is x cubed, okay, which the term is x cubed, so this is not a quadratic equation. While number 2 is obviously a quadratic equation and it follows our standard form. Now, sa ating instruction, if it is a quadratic equation, identify the quadratic, the linear, and the constant terms. So, since na-identify na natin that this is quadratic, we will have the quadratic term represented by QT. So the quadratic term is this whole term right here. So we have 2x squared, and which gives us the value of a, which is 2. So next is our linear term, which gives us this whole term right here. So which is 3x, and that gives us the coefficient b, which is equal to 3. While the constant term represented by CT, so that is 1, obviously it gives us the value of the coefficient C equal to 1. So for our third example, we have 3x squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. So again, this is a quadratic equation kasi the highest exponent that we can see in the equation is 2. So if it is a quadratic equation, then let's identify the quadratic term, which is 3x squared. And this gives us the value of coefficient a, which is 3. How about the linear term? That gives us negative 6x, which also gives us the value of coefficient b equal to negative 6, and the constant term gives us 4, and the value of c is also 4. Now for our fourth example, what if we have 4x squared plus 3x equals 0? So unlike our previous example, this quadratic equation only has 2 terms, and obviously we only have the quadratic term and the linear term. Now what happens to the constant term right now? So if that happens, that just means that the constant term is 0. So we have QT, or the quadratic term, which is 4x squared, that gives us a, which is equal to 4. The linear term, which is 3x, gives us b, which is equal to 3. And the constant term is 0, gives us c equal to 0. For our fifth example naman, we have 2x squared minus 5 equals 0. Again, we have only 2 terms. So obviously, in this quadratic equation, we have the quadratic term. And since walang variable beside this number, this is our constant term. So what happens to the linear term? Ibig din sabihin yan, kasi walang linear term, that means our linear term is equal to 0. So to determine the quadratic term, we have 2x squared, which gives us the coefficient a equal to 2. The linear term, which is missing in this quadratic equation, is 0, gives us with b equal to 0. And the constant term, which is negative 5, gives us with c equal to negative 5. So I told you earlier na hindi lahat ng quadratic equations are given in standard form already. So isa na dyan ang example number 6 natin. Now as you can see, iba yung hitsura niya sa ating standard form. Hindi natin madidetermine agad-agad kasi we don't see the quadratic term in this equation. Now in your grade 8, in your previous learnings, if we are going to multiply this monomial, kasi kailangan natin siyang i-simplify, di ba? So, if we are going to multiply this monomial, 2x, times a binomial, which is this x minus 2, we will use distributive property. Okay, so meaning, 2x times x and 2x times negative 2. That will be our terms. So, ito. Let's do it. So, we have 2x times x for distributive property. We have 2x squared. And then, ang kasunod na term is 2x times negative 2. That would be negative 4x equals 10. So, nakikita na natin that this is really quadratic. Pero, it is not in standard form. So, paano natin siya i-express into standard form? So, we will now apply addition property of equality. Now, remember na dapat sa ating standard form, this side should be equal to 0. In our example, we have 10. So, kailangan natin gawing 0 to. So, we have 10. Upang maging 0, we will subtract another 10. Okay, so 10 minus 10 becomes 0. Now, since it is an equation, in your previous learning again, what you added to this side of the equation will also be done in the other side of the equation. Or since we subtracted 10 from this side, we will also subtract 10 from this side. And we have 2x squared minus 4x. Okay? So, since wala naman tayong maiko-combine kasi wala namang like terms, so we have 2x squared minus 4x minus 10 as our quadratic equation in standard form. So, instead na ito, we can express that into this one. So, ito na yung standard form niya. Therefore, we are now sure that this is a quadratic equation. Now, since this is now a quadratic equation, our quadratic term is 2x squared, which gives us the value of a equal to 2. And then, the linear term is negative 4x, which gives us the value of b equal to negative 4. And lastly, the constant term, which gives us negative 10, and the value of c is negative 10 as well. Okay, so example number 7, we have the quantity of x plus 3 times the quantity of x plus 2, that will be equal to 3. Hindi siya quadratic equation kung titingnan. Pero, pag i-simplify natin, we will now use FOIL method. Okay? Ano tong FOIL method? This is first, outer, inner, and last term. So, imo-multiply natin ang dalawang binomial na to according to this sequence. So, we have first term. So, we have x and x. X times x is x squared. Outer terms, itong dalawa, nasa labas na term. So, we have x times 2. So, we have positive 2x. Inner, itong dalawang nasa loob. So, that is positive 3 times x. That means positive 3x. And lastly, the last terms, we have 3 times 2. So, magiging positive 6. And then just copy equal to 3. So, before we decide that this is a quadratic equation, let's combine like terms. So, since x squared, wala siyang like term, just copy. And then, we know that 2x can be added to 3x kasi like term sila. So, that will become 5x. And then, plus 6 equals 3. Okay. So, dito pa lang makikita na natin that this is already a quadratic equation, but not yet in standard form. Bakit? Kasi, we should equate our standard form in 0. So, merong 3 tayo dito. So, gagawin natin ulit yung ginawa natin previously. So, since 3 yan, we will also subtract 3. Okay? To make it equal to 0. And then, magsasubtract din tayo dito ng 3. So, we will just copy x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, so eto, we can combine them. So now we are left with x squared plus 5x, 6 minus 3, that is positive 3. And this is now our quadratic equation. So, ito, akala mo hindi quadratic, but once you apply the properties you learn in grade 8, we can now determine that this is a quadratic equation. Okay, so let's determine the quadratic term, which is x squared, and which gives us the coefficient a. Since wala kang nakikitang number, that just means that a is 1. And then linear term, which gives us 5x, and the value of b, which is 5, and the constant term, which gives us 3, and the value of c, which is also 3. And now we are down to our last example before we do our evaluation. So, example number 8 gives us the square of the quantity x minus 4 equals negative 8. So, hindi pa natin makikita kaagad, di ba? Kasi hindi nga siya in standard form. Now, balikan natin yung natutunan natin sa grade 8. May shortcut dito, but let's not do the shortcut here first, okay? So, hindi na muna tayo magsa-shortcut. So, ang ibig sabihin lang nitong squared na to is parang dalawang factor ng x minus 4. So, it will be x minus 4. Parang paghihiwalayin lang natin yung factors niya. X minus 4 equals negative 8. Ayan. So, the square of the quantity x minus 4 is equivalent to this, x minus 4 times x minus 4. Okay. So, again, in our previous example, if you multiply two binomials, we will use the FOIL method. So, first terms, x times x is x squared. Outer terms, x times negative 4, that is negative 4x. Inner term, negative 4 times x, that's negative 4x again. And last term, negative 4 times negative 4, that becomes positive 16 equals negative 8. Okay. So, combining like terms, let's combine. So, we have x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals negative 8. Okay. So, we can see clearly now that this is a quadratic equation, but it is not yet in standard form. So, let's equate this to 0. So, paano gawin? Okay. Remember, kailangan natin gawing 0 ang negative 8. So, since negative siya, we will add its opposite, which is the positive 8. So, negative 8 plus 8, and that becomes 0. So, what we did here, we will also do on the other side. So, plus 8. And then copy, we have x squared minus 8x plus 16. Ayan. So, since naging 0 na to, we will also simplify this. So, 16 plus 8, that is 24. And then, we will copy x squared minus 8x plus 24 kasi positive. Okay, so we are now with our quadratic equation in standard form. So to determine our quadratic term, we have x squared, which gives us a equal to 1. And then we have linear term, which gives us negative 8x, and b equal to negative 8. And lastly, the constant term, 24, which gives us c equal to 24. So, ayan. Okay, so right now, we're going to have an evaluation if may natutunan kayo sa tutorial. So, I'm going to flash examples of equations and you are going to identify if yung equation na yon is a quadratic equation or not a quadratic equation. So this is the first item in our evaluation. The given is 12x plus 5 equals 0. So if you need more time, you can pause this video and play it again once you already have your answer. So the answer for this is, it is not a quadratic equation. It is just linear. Kasi the degree of this equation is only 1. Now, if you're going to look at the variable, the power of this variable is only 1, or the highest power is 1. So, linear siya. Now, this is our second example. The example is 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. Is it quadratic or not a quadratic equation? So, the answer is, it is a quadratic equation. Bakit? Because the highest degree is ito, 2. Now, let's identify the values of its coefficients. Yung value ng A, value ng B, at value ng C. So, for the value of A in this quadratic equation is 2. Ang value naman ng B is negative 7. At ang value naman ng constant term na si C is 3. This is for our third item. So, the given is x cubed plus 5x squared minus 2 equals 0. The answer is, it is not a quadratic equation. Kasi, the highest degree is 3. Now, for our fourth, this is 12x squared plus 7x equals 0. The answer is, it is quadratic equation. The highest or the degree is 2. While yung values ng coefficients niya is A equal to 12, yung B equal to 7, kasi ito yun, this is the quadratic term, this is the linear term, and since walang constant term, yung value ng C is 0. Next is x squared minus 5 equals 0. So this is a quadratic equation, and the coefficients, A is 1, B is 0. Bakit? Kasi we can only find the quadratic term, and then this one is the constant term. So, wala tayong linear term. And then, we have C equal to negative 5. The next one is we have the quantity of x minus 2 times the quantity of x minus 5 equals 2. Is it quadratic or not a quadratic equation? So, in our previous examples, yung mga examples natin sa discussion, this is a quadratic equation kasi yung product nitong dalawa will result into a quadratic equation, which is ito yon. Okay. And always remember that we should equate this side to 0 based on our standard form. And then, since ito na, meron na tayong standard form, let's identify the coefficients. A, which is 1. We have B, which is negative 7. And we have C, which is 8. So that's the end of our tutorial. I hope you have learned something from it. And if you like this video, if you like the tutorial, please give this a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you can be notified once I upload math tutorials in the future. Thank you for watching, and God bless you all.